Pepe, I shouldn't be talking right now. Pepe, just do the transition. Come on, dude. Come on. Yeah, welcome back to DG360. This is really anticipated. This is possibly could be the single best piece of content in over a year and a half from Star Citizen's official YouTube channel here. And it's got Tony Z in it. You know, I got mad respect for Tony Z. And you guys know I got like mad interest for the economy. That it is truly going to give us that supply and demand that we're seeking, that the AI, the algorithm itself is tried and tested and can simulate supply and demand just as if they were human. If there's any hiccups, I guess I'm going to understand it, but I will be upset if it releases and it doesn't give me at least some simulation, some experience of like, okay, yes, this is actually feeling like supply and demand, like a supply and demand economy, which is very hard to do. What they're doing is going to be very hard to do. A lot of people don't want the initial like player driven economy because they're too worried about the volatility. They're too worried about the people exploiting the system, which is really fascinating to me because a lot of us who are traders and really into the economy love that. That's how we make profit. Look at what happened to the crypto markets. Look what happened there. That's volatility like a motherfucker. And that's all player driven demand. And people made a lot of money off of that. And people lost a lot of money off of that. That's just the nature of the game. If that's what you're playing, you got to understand there's risks and there's rewards. Just depends upon what side of the coin you're on. how much smarts you got. Looking for those opportunities. Looking for those exploits. Those profit margins are all about zoning in on an area that might need something that doesn't have it. But maybe it's super risky to go into that area. So these are all the things that need to be talked about in this video. This is what I want to see in this video. People who have the type of patience to sit down and have a discussion about the economy. Let's watch and let's see what Tony Z has to say. Absolutely opportunity. By the way, Cardano, good job. If you guys are following me on DG Trades, you just made a fuck ton of money. DG Trades.
Hi, I'm Tony Zervik, and I'm the Director of Persistent Universe for Star Citizen. Today, I'm going to give you an update on how some of the back-end architecture and systemic functionality is coming along, what sort of progress we've made over the past year, what's on the horizon, and how all of this is going to impact your gameplay experience.
Okay, now, here's the thing that I love. I love that his background may, in fact, be a picture of his actual study that he has then overlaid behind him on a green screen, but it is actually a real picture of his study. Like that is baller. That is absolutely baller.
In order to give you a more comprehensive understanding of the long-term direction and what all of this will ultimately mean, I'm going to cover areas that are in various stages of development and will sometimes resort to illustrative examples so that the underlying concept can be made more clear.
Good morning, Starlet.
First, a quick review. Quantum is a simulation of the game universe, and its purpose is to allow things, the price of...
I'm already liking this. I'm already liking the content. I just have a feeling this is going to be very serious.
Goods at a given shop, the amount of piracy near a landing zone, or what missions are being offered, to evolve and change over time in logical and realistic ways. It does this by simulating hundreds of thousands of lightweight NPCs called quanta, whose AI logic is focused on just those aspects needed to produce the required information. Based upon a small list of attributes, each quanta makes its own decisions using the same resources, shops, and jobs as players. The simulation will need to calculate many millions of decisions per minute, and thus the AI behavior of quanta is focused on the most economically impactful details, which lets quantum focus all of its processing power on just those things that truly matter. Every quanta possesses its own unique set of attributes that influence how well it performs and how it perceives opportunities. The initial implementation of attributes will have two main categories, proficiencies and traits. Proficiencies act like a multiplier on how well Quanta perform a given task. Different jobs will require different proficiencies, and higher proficiencies will equate to superior execution. Traits describe what kind of jobs a Quanta prefers to do by modifying their perceived value of the job. Each job will have a specific alignment, and when a Quanta's traits match up with the job's alignment, they will perceive the payout of that job to be higher.
Yes, he is putting in the algorithm risk versus reward. That's what basically he says. In layman's term, what Tony is saying is that depending upon the proficiencies and the traits, your reward will go up depending upon the risk. So it's risk versus reward is what he's talking about in the algorithm.
To illustrate the concept, let's take two jobs on either end of the aggression scale and suppose, for now, that they pay out the same. Now, let's create a Quanta with an average aggression rating. This Quanta is no closer to the aggression alignment of factory worker than they are to security, so it's no surprise that for this Quanta, the payout for both jobs looks the same. However, as we decrease the aggression rating of this Quanta, we can see that the perceived amount of money for both jobs changes. Again, the actual pay hasn't changed at all, only the perceived value from that Quanta's point of view. It's still possible for the Quanta to choose security, but in this case, security would need to pay 4 times as much. If we change this Quanta's aggression trait to be very high, the opposite happens. Now, the aggressive security job looks like it pays much more, and the peaceful factory worker jobs appear to pay much less. Of course, jobs have more than a single trait to distinguish themselves. Suppose we take another aggressive job, pirate. With just one dimension, the pirate job would look just as lucrative to this Quanta as the security job. We can differentiate between these two jobs by adding the morality trait and putting both of these aggressive jobs on the proper place on that scale. Now that all jobs have a unique combination of trait alignments, we can watch the perceived payout for all 3 of these jobs change, even though, in this case, all jobs actually pay the exact same amount. We're currently experimenting with 4 different traits, but expect.
So you understand what he's showing here is it's a table. It's an XY table. It's showing like all the different variables that come into play when it comes to what it is that you're going to be getting paid. So for instance, and this is in custom and in line with, I'm imagining, mission rewards right now. Not quite sure if this has anything to do with like the commodity pricing, but I think this has more to do with like the PvE mission spawn and payout. And yeah, the Quanta itself, I believe, is the actual NPC or the AI, because as we know, the NPC doesn't have to physically be there. It can be in the algorithm, and then when you get close to its instance, it will spawn around you. So yeah, this is about AI decision making, but you can see that whether your morality is very low or your morality is very high, that and it's an aggressive type of occupation, being pirate or security, that you are getting paid a bit more because it's like dangerous. It's more dangerous. So the security and the pirate pay has to be equal to each other, so that there are instances where when security and pirates have a reason to be around one another. Otherwise, why would you go around a pirate if you're not getting paid the requisite amount of the danger of the task? Otherwise, there would be no security that would have to go around the pirates at all. The pirates would be then alone, and there would be no security forces to go after it. So, like the pays themselves have to be requisite to one another. You know what I mean? It might not even have anything to do with the pay, right? I like from my understanding of it, what I'm trying to say is that the actual Quanta or the parts and pieces that are playing the roles as NPCs have to have reasons to be around one another. Whether it's going to show you pay or not, what it's trying to tell you is that there is going to be, like, if in a high aggression scenario, you're going to want security and pirates around one another. Otherwise, you're going to have pirates by themselves and security doing something else.
Expect to add at least a few more over time to help ensure that Quanta do not congregate around the highest paying job at any given moment, and instead, just like a real population of individuals, all perform their own unique mental calculus to determine what looks most appealing to them, and in effect gives us the nice distribution of workers that we want. The quantum simulation that we ran at the last Citizencon was implemented in TypeScript, a relatively slow language that limited us to less than 10,000 quanta. All of that logic has since been rewritten in C#, and a lot of...
Nice. You see how he said slow language with just 10,000? That's just still quite a bit.
Time and effort invested into optimizing the threading and resource locking, which wound up increasing performance by more than 2 orders of magnitude. Stanton is one of the more complex solar systems and will require about 50 to 100,000 quanta in order to achieve the required fidelity, which means we've got a lot of extra headroom without any additional performance tuning to support upcoming solar systems like Pyro. Much like a real economy, quantum produces a tremendous amount of data, and there are countless ways to adjust the simulation. Finding a combination that produces the desired results is difficult, and in order to solve this problem, we created Odin, a plugin for the Python-based JupyterLab environment. Odin is a powerful web-based tool that allows for real-time data interpretation of the game's dynamic and complex economy based on the actions of both players in the live game and quanta. Here, I'm using Odin to simultaneously show all of the graphs related to the economy of aluminum, where it's mined, refined, manufactured, and sold around the Stanton system. It's a bit overwhelming, so I'm going to refine the search by adding the word buying to the Graph Explorer.
Now, to reiterate, also using C#, he's ordered 2 orders of magnitude more than 10,000 quanta at a time. So we're saying 20, I would guess around 25,000 quanta running at any given point in the simulation. And what ends up happening is that gives us that number a long time ago when we were speaking about the 9-to-1 9 NPC per every 1 player action. So our actions will be mixed in with the quantum. So what ends up happening is our actions won't matter as much, which kind of scares me because we're merging in with the 10 to 20,000, well, the 20,000 plus interactions that are going on that are the quanta that are happening right now. And so we're merely more a part of the system than us having a direct effect. So that's something that needs to be taken into account. 100,000? Okay, yeah, sorry, I just went times 2. I did okay, yeah, I get it. We squared it. Did we square it, or is that what's going on? Okay, all right. A shit ton more. Just so you guys can get that in layman's terms. Yeah. So we went from 10,000, right, to in C# going to a shit ton more, okay? So just for people that are looking at Nope and saying to themselves, like, DG doesn't know what he's talking about. Look at chat. They're telling him Nope. This guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. I do. But we're just, they just want me to be as correct as possible. They want me to be as Tony Z as possible right now. Okay. Therefore, thus and verily, I shall be.
Before seeing the actual graphs, we can preview which ones our search has identified, which is very useful in more complicated search scenarios. In this case,
it was always 9-to-1, which I had a huge problem with at the very beginning. Before they showed us this plastic, I had a huge problem with that because I felt more like a cog in a large machine than anything else. Like I'm not really going to have an effect because we're part of this algorithm. So I'm still a little bit concerned. Because I'm very hardcore player-driven demand type guy. So I'm still concerned, but like when he showed this to us at Citizencon 2 years ago, I thought to myself, well, if anybody can simulate the demand, it's Tony Z. From what I'm seeing here, I was very happy. Like I changed my tune the second I started looking at this. And I thought to myself, this man is actually like trying to simulate actual supply and demand.
Case though, we've already whittled things down to a manageable size, so I'm going to jump to the actual graphs. Everything looks pretty healthy. You can see the cyclical nature of commodity prices, a sign that we're on the right track and getting the economic modulation we want.
Yes and yes, Mr. Plastic and Sir are absolutely right. So in order to have like a large effect or a large splash, you either have to be in a very small pond with not a lot of fish, or you have to basically be in an area that has, in other words, be in an area that doesn't have a lot of quanta in it, which there might be a couple systems like that. Like, I think that Tony would actually plan that. Like, in my mind, I feel like Tony would have like a couple systems out of the way that would be more player driven than quanta driven. Like, that's just my idea. That's just me being crazy here. That's just me kind of speculating here. But like, I would imagine that even for data sets that the economic team would do something of that nature so that they can pull off from like the actual player driven demand and then insert it into the quanta.
All of these graphs are updated from the simulation in real time, and we can zoom in on particular time periods of interest, which is invaluable when trying to figure out exactly why the availability of a critical resource dried up or the price of something went through the roof. With such a complex system, it's often difficult to predict what sort of information we might want to inspect, and Odin was therefore designed to be extremely flexible and adaptive. One particularly powerful data analysis tool that we developed allows us to view the flow of goods and services from a high-level perspective. We call it the Laissez graph, and it can dynamically target economic flows and animate transitions so that we can visually see how things change over time. Here I've selected a number of different product nodes, and you can see all of the economic relationships for those items laid out on the graph. The graph allows us to switch between several key flows, like the volume of goods, the flow of UEC, and even the value density of specific routes in the universe.
Damon.
The nodes are ordered by greatest to least economic activity, and changes over time will reorder them. We can thus detect important shifts in the economy simply by observing how the nodes adjust their position. This tool can inspect both real-time and historical data, so we can step back in time and see the progression of factors that caused a problem to develop and what could be done to remedy it. When inspecting a segment of time, you can see elements of the economy phasing in and out, depending upon whether or not they were relevant during that period. Often we'll want to dig into a particular material to investigate how that material flows throughout the economy. With the Laissez graph, we can choose a material like aluminum, and then all of the items that metal is used to construct, which immediately gives.
These data sets and these flowcharts are really important for the economic team to determine overall the demand, supply and demand. So what's happening right now, and the reason why people like Jack Axton and are having issues, and others that are trading, including myself, and are pissed off that they cannot get the supply that they're looking for, is primarily because they're just looking at the flow charts right now, and they're seeing what it is that people are going after, how often they're going after it, what the overall supply and demands are. And it's something that they're trying to tune right now to get ready for Quantum 1.0, for baby Quantum 1.0 is essentially what they're doing right now, at least in my mind. This is me speculating right now, but in my mind, that would be the smart thing to do. And I think that's what's happening behind the scenes. And really, when you're looking at the flow chart like this is an instance where, like, normally speaking, the system has already developed around you and you're being born into it, that there is a system already set that you're into it, and it's very hard to make an impact here because of that ratio, like we said, that offers some level of stability for good or for bad is unyet to be seen. But like, I feel like the trader in me feels like my opportunities are squashed down a little bit. However, on the other side of the spectrum, if it brings in more players because they don't like volatility, that could also be a plus as well.
Gives us an intuitive view of the relationships between manufacturing recipes and system-wide logistics from a bird's eye view. Here, it looks like most of the raw aluminum in the economy is being funneled into items that are being sold in shops on Crusader and ArcCorp. After a while, though, the shops at Crusader run short of inventory and stop selling such goods, and all of the sales move to Hurston and ArcCorp. As new materials, recipes, and items are added to an increasingly complex universe and player behaviors shift, we'll frequently run into such problems, and analytical tools like the Laissez graph will be invaluable in helping us to quickly identify such issues and determining what needs to be done to restore balance. Player action.
So if the algorithm fucks up, so what Tony is saying is, if the algorithm actually fucks up and supply and demand get way too out of whack, they can go to the Laissez charts and they can say, okay, let's just look at this and tweak this here. Let's tweak that there. Let's get shit back in balance.
Are fed back into Quantum so that it can factor that data into the simulation, and Odin can evaluate that information just as easily as it can that derived from Quanta. It's fully linked into the law system, for example,
they have Odin do it for them.
Generate a heat map showing where players are committing specific crimes. If there's too much PvP in an area that's supposed to be secure, we might add more security, place additional turrets, or increase the penalties levied by the law system. To be clear, Odin's analytical and statistical capabilities will be of extensive benefit to the quantum simulation too, as they'll allow it to better understand how to adjust various dials and levers to allow for a dynamic universe where things logically ebb and flow and everything functions as part of a larger, more complex machine. Quanta focused on transporting goods, for example, will demand a price premium based upon how much risk they'll be exposed to on their route, and Odin can sort all of the possible paths they might take by risk, fuel consumption, or whatever other metric they wish to consider so that they can decide whether they're interested in the job, and if so, what sort of payment they would require. Here's a bar graph showing where all of these felons are spending their time, and another one showing how they're spending their money. Odin can identify the most popular mining sites, as well as what materials are being extracted from those locations. It knows what sort of ships players are flying, how many players are on board, and what sort of ships they're squaring off against. Odin has complete knowledge of the mission system, which allows it to map player positions against the missions they've accepted. In one shot, then, we can get a sense of which missions players find most interesting, so that we can focus on creating more of that type of content. and where those missions are taking them so that we can understand sections of the solar system that are underutilized.
Right, Burger.
One of the
we were just
most
talking
interesting
about that,
graphs we've created is this one that measures mission design quality. Each circle represents a mission, and larger circles indicate that more players have done that particular mission. The x-axis details the percentage of players that successfully completed the mission out of all of the players who completed it. And the y-axis denotes the percentage of players that finished the mission, even if they failed it.
So now he's talking about missions. What did he say wrong? I'm curious, Shikuku. What did you pick up that he said wrong? Type it in here. I'm just curious.
This exposes all sorts of interesting insights to us. Low positions on the graph, for example, indicate that most players are getting a result other than success or failure. They're either abandoning the mission or disconnecting, neither of which is good. Positions on the far left mean that most of the players that undertook that mission failed it. The lower left quadrant signifies missions that are abandoned frequently and fail when they aren't, which likely points to a problem. Missions near the lower right have a high success rate, but are frequently abandoned, possibly indicating that they're too easy or boring. The most interesting missions are in the upper middle. They're frequently played through to the end, but aren't always successful. These are the missions that are both engaging and difficult. We use information like this to tune the simulation, but also to give us basic feedback on what sort of missions players find most appealing and where problems reside. The refining gameplay that was released late last year made use of a couple of new back-end services. The job service is more general purpose and will also be a key component in the implementation of a number of other upcoming features, including everything from cargo loading and unloading to repair, refuel, and restocking services. The refining service provides game servers with the ability to retrieve a refiner's available processing capacity and a price quote for a given quantity of material with the specified speed and quality options. These new services exemplify the way that development nowadays often proceeds, which is to ensure that all of the linkage to and from the data source is properly abstracted from the start, such that once Quantum can provide the necessary data, we can flip a switch to activate it. Previously, when Quanta traveled to a planet or a moon to mine a resource, they picked a random location on the surface. This meant that Quantum wasn't yet capable of generating the spatial fidelity we needed so that we could properly determine exactly where NPCs should and shouldn't be found. The resource service that we completed last year, however, provides Quantum with an API that not only gives it
oh my God, wait, hold on, let me finish this.
Access to this information, but also enables those amounts to be modified so that as players in Quantum mine an area, it will gradually be depleted. To demonstrate, I brought up a planet. Now I'm going to highlight the location of all of the gold ore. Players in Quanta, of course, would not have this information, and to represent that fact, I'm going to place a shadow over everything. You can see a single quant exploration ship approaching the planet from the right. As it travels across the surface, it will unveil the quantity and location of that ore, visually represented by removing the shadow. And
can we have this in our ship? I want one of these scanners on my ship.
Then broadcast that information to other quanta within its organization. It has discovered a huge vein of valuable ore, and quantum miners have now started arriving in mass to extract it.
Oh, stay away, quantum miners. I found this. This is my plot. Goddamn quantum miners know all about it because I found it. God damn it. Look at them coming in like locusts. Look at that shit. You know, that's one thing to be said about this system. That's something that might be concerning to some. You staked it out. You found it, right? Well, that information looks like it gets communicated out to the masses of locusts ready to attack, dude. Oh, no. Oh, maybe it's all according to information being sold on that particular location. Oh, interesting. Which would give data runners and ships that did that, like the MSR, more value.
Focusing predominantly on those areas where the concentration is known to be highest, although they'll also consider things like the amount of risk in a given area, perhaps caused by a player or NPC organization fighting to control that region. I'm running this at an accelerated rate, and you can see that the amount of ore at that first large site is declining rapidly. The Explorer has now discovered.
Well, I mean, like, wow, that tidbit of information of finding that should pay out huge, by the way. Like, being a data runner could be like one of the best jobs in the game, dude. Like, as far as efficiency, as far as like time versus money, man, you know, finding spots like these, being a recon guy, being a data runner guy could pay huge.
discovered a second field of gold ore near the equator. And because the original deposit has now been mined so extensively, what remains is more time-consuming and difficult to extract and is thus relatively less attractive. The Quanta have figured this out, and most of them have started to focus their attention on the newer site. Taken together, these new...
I wonder how data flow happens, though, like as far as the origin point of finding it, you know, and staking it out. Like I wonder how information sets flow in terms of like when that information is put out there and Quanta does find out about it. Like I'm curious about that process.
Features allow Quantum to generate a lot more detailed information, which will in turn result in a better and more realistic gameplay experience. Quantum will know where exactly on the surface of a planet NPCs might be found and what they should be doing. It will understand the value of knowledge and factor its acquisition, sharing, and sale into its calculations, including what any information you eventually attempt to sell would be worth. Quantum has now been pretty thoroughly integrated into our backend architecture, and the service will be built and shipped with all future releases of the game, which took a considerable amount of time and effort given how different some of its tools and technologies were versus what we had already set up and configured. There is still a tremendous amount of work to do on the simulation side, but we are getting close to the point at which portions of its simulated data will be an improvement over the algorithmic logic embedded into various services. We're going to do a bit more testing before we enable it to start injecting that data into the live game, though, and even then we're going to start very small and limit the focus to a few select areas so that we can work out any problems. The first couple of commodities for which Quantum will gain the ability to dictate the price will be fuel and repair materials. We're also going to allow it to control the amount of piracy and possibly transport freighters and security in a few test locations. But keep in mind that until more of the data behind the curtains is exposed, the modulation may at times seem a bit arbitrary. We're going to be more aggressive with service beacons, and we'll soon move most of that responsibility, the type of beacon being offered, the location, the reward, and the difficulty, to Quantum. Our primary focus right now is less on getting a lot of data moving back and forth, and more on getting all of the technological plumbing working properly. In order to properly calculate fuel prices, for example, Quantum needs to have a concept of fuel, what type of ships Quanta are using, and fuel efficiency, none of which it previously had. In order to gauge the demand for repair services, ships in the simulation need a concept of damage, which didn't previously exist. There's often a lot of service work involved in allowing new types of data to flow between Quantum and the game. With iCache now largely complete, we've been able to shift...
Great question. Mind's Eye says, so we'll be able to mine all of the gold in the verse, or will it be replenished? So what Mind's Eye is asking is if, in fact, the assets or the commodities in the game are finite or infinite. It's a great question. I think at this point, I think we're talking infinite. I think they're able to like spawn points of resources at any given points in space or on planets or on moons. I don't think we have a finite base system like Dual Universe. And I think that even Dual Universe is questionable if in fact those resource pockets are finite. I think at times NovaCorp goes in and they tweak it a little bit and put more resources where they weren't before. So Ash is saying it will run but replenish over time. They already said so. Okay, yeah. It would make sense that they're not finite. So in this game, we're not dealing with like finite resources. So that's something to keep in mind. We have a finite amount of systems, and so it only makes sense to have like an infinite based resource pool, because if you eventually it would just run out, and then so they're hopefully they're going to be careful, and hopefully Quantum regulates the amount of supply properly, which is really again the reason for this talk.
Some resources around, and within the last month have now doubled the number of engineers working on the systemic functionality. As a result, we're now in the early stages of a number of critical new services, including everything from the air traffic control service that's required for server meshing, to the NPC scheduler that will enable dynamic populations, to the virtual AI service that is necessary for the next major feature I'm going to discuss. Star Citizen's AI architecture is broken up into 3 distinct levels. The high-fidelity characters that you see in the game execute subsumption logic on a server, and this is far and away the most computationally expensive of the 3 types of AI. It's got a similar sense-think act cycle as the other AI, but because you can see the NPCs as they execute their tasks, there's often little to no potential for cheating or simplification. Something as simple as sitting in a chair requires a lot of item searching, animation, raycasting, collision detection, and more. This is a problem because in Star Citizen, we're trying to simulate entire solar systems, and we can't afford to execute this kind of expensive logic for tens of thousands of characters that players can't even see.
Right.
So we do what many games do and temporarily suspend any AI that's not in proximity to a player.
Right. This
This creates another roadblock, though, because you can't effectively simulate an economy when portions of it are constantly being shut down and restored.
But they're not really being shut down. They still are running. They're just not physically there. It's still running. And if you're in the area, welcome to the fam, how you doing, bud? Welcome to the fam. Yeah.
Started, and it's the fundamental reason why quantum exists. Merging these two AI extremes, subsumption and quantum, solves our basic problem. NPCs look and act exactly as you'd expect when you can see them, and the universe's economic wheels always remain in motion. There's one major flaw, however, with this solution. The heavyweight subsumption NPCs that you can see and interact with don't execute any AI logic when you're not around, and thus they're severely limited in what they can do and when they can do it. Solving this issue is the responsibility of a middle tier of systemic logic that I call virtual AI. Virtual AI allows virtual NPCs, VNPCs for short, to seamlessly transition back and forth between the fully realized and physical world of subsumption and a far more efficient intangible back-end ether where they retain the ability to interface with elements of the systemic architecture just like a player.
Wow. So he's saying that there's NPCs that are like placeholders that essentially just announce pricing. Okay, which is normally how it goes, and that they are there as placeholders, generally speaking. But now that there is a new layer, and there is a new layer of virtual AI where they're calling it VNPC, that are actually not just placeholders. They're not just there to announce pricing at any given point in time. They will actually announce the price, but then they will go back into the equation. That is in fact pretty fucking insane. That is pretty fucking cool, actually.
This technology is going to unleash a lot of new and exciting gameplay, but it's going to take more than a few sentences to properly explain what I'm talking about, so let's walk through it all in more detail. This is the Stanton solar system. You can see the 4 planets, ArcCorp, Hurston, Microtech, and Crusader. I'm going to zoom into the Crusader planetary area, and you can see its 3 moons, Yela, Daymar, and Selen, and the space station Port Olisar. You can imagine looking at that station, hundreds of NPCs going about their lives. This is how you think of the universe, always in motion, always changing, always real, regardless of whether you're actually looking at it or not. As I mentioned, though, that's an illusion. We can't afford it. When you're not looking, the server deactivates and unloads a lot of unnecessary baggage, but a wide assortment of back-end services retain knowledge of everything that really matters and provide an active interface to those systems. NPCs outside of landing zones are treated differently. Quantum accumulates statistical information for where NPCs should reside and what they should be doing from its quanta, which allows us to determine how often you should see a pirate or what a freighter you run into should have in its cargo hold. These areas are called probability volumes, and the important thing to note is that the NPCs...
Verp, listen to me, buddy. How long have you been here with us and gone and left because you think I talk too much? Verp, if you can't handle me speaking, buddy, just leave again and then come back in 4 months like you normally do, buddy. This is the type of community we're in, man. Chill out, man.
they create are ephemeral. They pop into existence for a brief moment so that the area you're viewing looks like what Quantum says it should, and once they're sufficiently far from any players, they're completely and forever destroyed. I'm going to add a player here, which you can see off to the left. As they pass by Daymar, they're in range of a probability volume that eventually decides they should encounter a pirate. So a pirate is created and engages the player, and after a bit, the player decides that they're outmatched and decides to run. Once they're sufficiently far from that NPC, it's destroyed. It doesn't persist in any fashion, and you'll never see them again. The player continues traveling to Port Olisar, and the translucent green wireframe indicates that the area isn't loaded on the server, and thus the subsumption AI isn't active. I'm going to add a VNPC in a moment, but first let's quickly recap what makes them so different. VNPCs always execute some form of AI logic, regardless of whether or not they are in proximity to a player. Virtual AI is extremely lightweight and computationally efficient, stripping out all of the expense related to visuals and unnecessary details, yet retains the full ability to interact with the game in the ways that truly matter. Virtual AI executes within a backend service and can thus easily be scaled and doesn't put any load on the servers. VNPCs can seamlessly transition back and forth from lightweight, back-end-driven AI entities to full-blown, subsumption-driven NPCs, and are thus indistinguishable from an NPC that really did execute expensive subsumption logic all the time. Lastly, VNPCs gradually build up their own unique histories as they live out their lives. They evolve. Okay, so back to the example. Once
I love how he said that. They evolve. Eventually, they'll take over the world.
the player gets close enough to Port Olisar, that area is streamed into existence, loaded onto a server, and the NPCs initialized to resume whatever they should be doing at that time of day. Now I'm going to introduce a VMC pirate near the player, and they're going to immediately attack. After a few moments, the VNPC comes out ahead in this battle, and the player is killed. Because their crime was committed in range of an active comrade, it's recorded in their character history along with the time and location of the felony. An upcoming tracking app will allow you to access information like this if you've registered with the local authorities so that the digital footprints players and VNPCs leave behind can be tracked. This VNPC's name is Dragon, and since they're now wanted in this jurisdiction, the comrade has affixed a real-time marker to his position. With the only player in this area dead, the server now streams Port Olisar and the comrade out, but as I previously noted, VNPCs aren't destroyed like a regular NPC created from a probability volume, and their logic isn't suspended like an NPC at a landing zone.
Ah, they exist.
Instead, VNPCs simply transition from their physicalized state, where authority over their actions is controlled by subsumption logic executing on a server, to their native ethereal state, where their virtual AI executes on the back end.
Yep.
Dragon now begins to exit the area, and the comrade continues to track his position until he passes out of range, at which point the real-time information converts to a last known position report. He's decided that he needs money, and he's a bit risk-averse, so he elects to head all the way out to Yellow, where there are quite a few transport freighters carrying valuable ore and little in the way of security. Okay, Dragon has arrived at Yellow's asteroid field and has now crossed back into range of another active comrade, so his real-time position is now once again being reported as indicated by both the character history and the tracking marker. There aren't any players in this area, and thus none of this is streamed onto a server. Everything you're seeing is a result of a variety of different services communicating with one another. VNPCs trigger probability volumes just like players, and Yellow's shows that there's quite a bit of freighter traffic in this area. So, Dragon won't have to wait very long before he generates an encounter. There's one. Dragon just caused the creation of a freighter, which itself becomes a VNPC so that it can react to what's happening via its own virtual AI. Dragon now engages the freighter. He starts firing on it. He's still within range of an active comrade, and thus this latest crime is added to his character history. He's now wanted for both murder and piracy, and the bounty on him just jumped from 6 to 10,000 UEC.
Nice.
Increasing the size of their rap sheet and the price on their head is one of the simplest forms of VNPC evolution, and over time we'll look to add additional ways for VNPCs to grow and increase their influence, from recruiting followers in an attempt to become a shipping magnate or a crime boss to offering their own missions. The captain of that freighter isn't going to surrender so easily. He's broadcast a combat assist service beacon that players can choose to accept, and he's offered a 3,000 UEC reward for his protection.
Mission spawning. This is great.
Unfortunately for him, he's pretty heavily outmatched, and he's quickly destroyed, causing the service beacon to expire before anyone can come to his aid.
Wow.
Bits of information like this are fed back to Quantum, and in sufficient quantity will cause all sorts of things to change. How much security patrol missions in that area pay, what transports that have to travel through that area will demand as a risk premium, and how much a ship in distress will offer for someone to come to their aid. The freighter's destruction has left some debris and possibly a few items of value, so if a player had already been en route, they might arrive to find the aftermath. Another murder has now been attributed to Dragon, and the bounty on him just once again jumped, this time from 10 to 14,000 UEC.
Getting tasty.
He took a bit
there,
of
man.
damage from that encounter and is eventually going to need some repairs. A harder working pirate might look to plunder a few more freighters before heading back, but Dragon's personality attributes indicate that once he's got enough cash to cover the basics, he's more interested in drinking and gambling than piracy. So he leaves the area, and once again the real-time location tracking ceases once he's out of range of the comrade. He's heading back to Port Olisar, which is the closest location that has everything he wants. A fence to sell his stolen goods, shops to repair and restock his ship, and a bar where he can spend the remainder of his cash. The comrade near Port Olisar has been disabled, which means that Dragon's position isn't updated upon approach. The area remains devoid of any players, and thus it's still not streamed into memory. Dragon can therefore remain in his ethereal state and avoid a lot of computational expense related to maneuvering his ship, but he still needs to interface with the air traffic control service to request a landing pad and transition from his ship to the station. Services like this are always fully operational and accessible to VNPCs. That landing request is logged to his history, though, so while the disabled...
I think what ends up happening, Damon's asking a good question. He says, all this sounds well and good, but what if there's members of test guarding every area with profitable spawns? I mean, like, to me, it sounds like that the Quantum could then just realize that there is an area that's in high distress where there's a lot of people popping around the area and then react to it like with security, especially if it's like a lawful based system. So like that's how I think it would react. I think in a lawful based system that if people do that you're going to see a reaction from Quantum figuring that out, and then security forces will just come in and obliterate all the test members that are there who are causing an issue. Now in unlawful systems, get yourself an organization and some friends and do the work yourself, you know.
Comm array would make it a bit harder for a bounty hunter to track him. There are lots of other ways by which locational information on a character can be obtained. Dragon needed to refuel and repair his ship, and you can see those actions reflected in his history as he interfaces with the shop service that controls those operations. When a VNPC transitions to a landing zone that's streamed in, the virtual AI service that drives their logic temporarily cedes control of the character to the NPC scheduler that specifies who resides at what location. This is the same foundation upon which the dynamic populations feature will be built, except that it will be Quantum instead of the virtual AI service dictating the changes in the population. The end result is that if a VNPC is assigned to a landing zone and you're at that location, you can run into them like any other NPC. Dragon is now hanging out in local bar, which was added to Port Olisar for the purposes of this demo. If you were to walk into the bar at this moment, he'd be physicalized with the rest of the environment and you'd actually see him there. Dragon eventually gets his fill of entertainment.
This is the part that like blows my mind, man. This is the part that like really blows my mind.
Or maybe he just runs out of money. Either way, it's back to work, and he'll be jetting back to Yellow to try and prey on more unprotected cargo ships. So he contacts air traffic control to get clearance to leave the area and departs. The same player that Dragon first encountered and killed is looking to exact some revenge, though, and claim the big bounty on Dragon's head. They've surmised that there might be a pattern to Dragon's movement and think that he might head back out to Yellow. So they position themselves between Port Olisar, where they know that Dragon just left, and Yella and activate a quantum interdiction field. Dragon, still in his lightweight ethereal form, initiates a quantum jump from...
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if that had anything to do with the beacon, or I'm not quite sure exactly if that had anything to the recon station around being down. I'm not quite sure how he would have landed with the crime stat either. That's a good point. Welcome to the fam, Gavin. How you doing, buddy? Good to have you here, man. Welcome to the fam. I think that would be much more acceptable in an unlawful based system than it would be in a lawful based system. You know what I mean? Like landing at Port Olisar, having that kind of crime stat. I'm not quite sure exactly what happened there.
Port Olisar to Yella, and just like a player, routes that movement through the probability volume service that is responsible for interdictions. Once he gets within range of the player's interdiction bubble, his jump is interrupted, and he transitions from executing virtual AI on the back end to a full-blown subsumption-driven AI executing logic on a server, so that the two of them can battle it out. If the player once again gets the worst of it, they might decide to change up their tactics a bit and wait to see if Dragon soon returns to Port Olisar, where they could try to sneak up on him on foot.
Wait a second. Which would allow some version of like PvP, or I'm sorry, what I want to say, confrontation on ground, on planets, in cities, that there would be zones of engagement, if that's the case. Which would make sense, because if you're going to do it, because a lot of people were bitching about that initially when we were theory crafting and saying we would like some danger, we would like some FPS action on the ground, and then some people were saying, oh, that's going to be too crazy because players are going to be shooting all over the fucking place. And I agree, there needs to be zones where that's kind of out of bounds, and areas where it's not, in a city environment, in a city kind of area. But like it really wouldn't apply to like PvE situations where you're going after NPC. Like, you know, you could like maybe NPCs like wide open everywhere you go in a city. That would be really, really great. You know? Yeah. And Snowfox, you have been, man. You've been one of the biggest proponents of people saying, hey, dudes, there's really going to be no green zones. And that's what customs is for, right, in Effigy?
The ultimate objective for Star
Glenn says, I don't want to be shot dead buying a burrito.
Evolving universe. Historically, however, our mission content has always been static. We've had no ability to modify it after we pushed a version out the door. Missions have also been confined to a single server, each of which was thus its own little island, cut off and oblivious to whatever was happening elsewhere.
Oh, snap! Tom Cruise, DG.
Greetings from Austria.
Well, greetings to you, bro. Thank you. Oh my God, with an anarchy. Wow. Wow. See you later, Anarchy. Thanks for those bits, bro. And wow, dude, that donation was awesome. Greetings from Austria, he says. That's awesome.
Environmental data that applies to all of the servers, what items the shop offers for sale, how many freighters or pirates are in a given region of space, or what missions are available at a landing zone, couldn't be altered by the instance mission logic that executes on individual servers, since we didn't yet have a means of coordinating those efforts. The end result has been a universe that often feels static and fails to offer sufficient variety. Dynamic events are a special type of mission intended to help remedy this problem. They are modular chunks of configurable content that might involve anything from throwing a simple wrench into the wheels of the systemic economy, to a prison break that stresses the law system, to a full-blown invasion of a solar system. Dynamic events are global in nature. They affect the entire array of servers. They do this via extensions to the mission language that allow them to declare what logic runs in parallel on every server, and what executes on the back end, while at the same time gaining the ability to query and modify a lot of global data. This allows us to keep the critical elements of these scenarios synchronized across all the servers while retaining the flexibility for every server to have its own unique state. Conceptually, the servers control the battle and the backend manages the war. The Xenothreat mission that we released in the first quarter was a dynamic event. It was triggered manually, although Quantum will eventually gain the ability to automatically activate these scenarios when conditions warrant. If, for example, the amount of piracy in an area gets out of control, Quantum might search through the mission library to find a dynamic event.
This is going to be something that will literally be an evolution where they're not putting these things in manually. And that is very exciting. I said that about Assault on Stanton with Xenothreat happening. This was also a test on the servers to see what the servers can handle. Another reason why Delamar was pulled straight out because of all the additional object containers being put in because of Xenothreat. But like, this is something that I'm really happy to see him talking about. Like, this is the evolution of what Quantum will bring to the game. Are events like this all the time happening naturally based upon supply and demand based economics, man. That is going to be fantastic when it gets to that point. There is going to be a long road. Do not kid yourself. This is going to be years and years and years worth of work. This is one of the largest chunks of work that needs to be done in the game, period. So like, I don't even know if we're in baby phase yet. We're still like in the belly right now. We're like in embryo mode right now. You know, it's insane.
Compatible with an elevated amount of piracy.
The first version of it in Effigy is, but I can guarantee you for what he's talking about right now, I don't think that's anywhere near us. So that's just me speculating, but like I think like there is a lot of work still yet to be done. They might put out, like you said, Quantum right now, I believe is planned to be very, very soon. But like, as far as what we're looking for it to do, I think there's a lot more time and work needing to be involved in it.
Customize and instantiate that scenario so that a lot of handcrafted content, unique character dialogue, challenges, rewards can be blended into the universe simulation. We're aiming for the best of both worlds then, a systemic universe that provides a logically consistent background environment with the ability to overlay content and storylines that writers, designers, and many others have spent a lot of time creating. This is Quasar, a new tool that lets us manage dynamic events in the live game. It's linked to the same star map as Quantum and has access to much of the same information. I'm looking through the library of available events, and as I select each one, you can see the input parameters that can be used to customize that particular scenario. We've got quite a few of these at different stages of development, with Fleet Week, Ninetales, and Infiltrator being the next few in the pipeline. I'm going to walk you through a simple dynamic event called Quasar Demo that will show off a few of the systemic hooks we've linked into the mission system, but first I need to specify the inputs. The first thing that it requires is a location, and I'm going to select Port Olisar by simply clicking on the star map. The next couple of variables require a ship type. I'm going to specify Idris for the defender input and Cutlass Black for attackers. If Quantum were to programmatically trigger an event like this, it'd fill in variables like these with something that made contextual sense. So, for example, it'd be looking at what sort of ships were in the area where the event would be activated to determine what it could consider. The next variable relates to difficulty, which in this particular case is simply...
So what he's saying is the algorithm will choose the scenario automatically given upon ships in the area or NPC or VNPC in the area.
...and configured to dictate the speed at which enemies will appear. The last input...
Like he's manually doing this right now, but what he's saying is that the overall end game is for the algorithm to do this naturally, which is fantastic.
...enemies remaining indicates how many enemies must be destroyed in aggregate across all of the servers in order for the war phase to be completed and the victory phase to be activated. I'm going to set this to 10. With everything configured, I can now activate the event. Quasar communicates this request to the dynamic mission service, which then initializes the backend logic, allocates the global variables, sets up the phase conditionals, informs all of the servers to start any instance logic the event might contain, and quite a bit more.
Starlet.
I'm now going to flip over to Quasar's active tab so that we can check the event's real-time data.
Serious I am.
You can see that there's currently just a single event active, but we could just as easily activate multiple and give each of them a different set of inputs. Dynamic events organize changes to backend data in coordinated chunks of logic called phases, and the phases that have been created for this event can be seen at the top right. They're all inactive now, hence the red color, and will turn green if their conditional evaluates to true, at which point their embedded logic would execute.
By the way, the options that you cannot read here that I will read for everybody, very interesting data sets here. You have modify shop, you have lockdown, you have war, and you have victory. Those are pretty cool. Those are pretty cool sets.
The event's global variables are shown below that, and it's in this area that you can see the enemy's remaining variable for which we previously specified an input value of 10. Lower still are the functions for this event that have been marked external and which allow us to manually or programmatically call functions to customize aspects of the event after it's already been launched. The list of items that a shop offers to buy or sell has always been static. Phases, though, can include shop modifiers, which open the door to dynamically changing all sorts of shop-related information. To test this, I'm going to bring up a client window so that we can see what Port Olisar's admin office is currently buying.
So right now he's saying in the PU, in the PTU, and in the PU, all data sets are static, meaning there's no correlation to supply and demand right now. We've been saying that forever. So when people are bitching about there not being enough to fill up their Caterpillar, it's only because people are literally plugging in the numbers, the values to look at the flow through charts to see where things are being picked up, how often they're being picked up, where they're being taken to. There's purpose to why there isn't enough supply right now, because they want to see where people are going, how them plugging it in is actually affecting flow through charts. They had a name for it. I can't remember what the Lian graph. I can't remember, but it's basically like a flow chart showing you where the items are going from A to B. That information right now is static. So there is no direct correlation or effect to supply and demand now. What he's saying is when it evolves, we're getting to the explanation of when it evolves.
I've minimized the inventory for this test, so I'm only expecting to see a couple of items. That's the full list right there, just hydrogen and processed food. The modify shop phase has been set up to activate when the backend variable called current phase has a value of 1, so I'm going to set it to that. The phase just turned green, meaning that it's enabled, and any changes to the backend data have now been applied. It applied a shop modifier to crank up the demand for food at Port Olisar, so let's see what's happening to the price. It was stable for a long time with just some minor fluctuations. Now, though, it's gone through the roof, the direct result of all that increased demand. So players and Quanta would be incentivized by higher prices to help.
That makes sense. I love that. I love seeing the correlation hit.
Correct this imbalance in the economy. This phase also had a shop modifier add a new item for purchase, and you can see that Quantum already knows about it. I'm going to flip back to the client, though, so that we can verify that this really did affect the inventory within the game.
Awesome.
Sure enough, the shop is now looking to purchase a new item, medical supplies. Manual control over the economy like this is not intended to be a substitute for quantum systemically
What's up,
derived
RK?
adjustments.
Welcome to the stream,
but simply
bro.
gives us the ability to occasionally nudge the system in a particular direction to add some interest or layer a compatible story onto the background environment or an existing trend. Quantum will then take these influences, factor them into the simulation, and output how everything changes in response so that all of the rough edges are smoothed. While we're looking at prices, I want to show off another new feature.
Which is what he's saying right now is evolution's better than what Elite Dangerous is. Like that is many times greater than what Elite Dangerous and what Frontier Development is doing in the economy in their neck of the woods. So what he's saying essentially is that the algorithm's always going to be running to give you a particular set of supply and demand values that will happen based upon the algorithm, but they can tweak it, they can change it based upon actual storyline events happening in systems. So they can go in and they can say, okay, well, there's a storyline, there's an event that we're going to have, it's going to be in June and yada, yada, yada. They can plan for it. And then they can tweak all different types of values around different solar systems in there that will have huge impacts on supply and demand and let it just run, which is really cool.
Feature that will go out the door within the next few months. As designers gain the ability to write mission logic that can properly affect systemic change, temporary price imbalances will become more common, and we wanted to have a way for the system to actively reach out and inform you rather than relying upon you constantly having to check in on an area to discover that there's an opportunity. If we wait just a bit longer, the admin office is going to reach a point where it's so desperate for food that it's going to start reaching out, looking for ways to obtain more supply.
So if you're looking at the brown line graph above you, it's showing you supply, and supply is way down. They don't have any units of food right there. So as you see supply going down, there's less and less food at the station. The red line above it is showing you the actual price. So the longer and the lower supply that there is, the higher the price point on food. So this station seriously needs food. This station is going to offer you more a reward for bringing food to the station and thus simulating supply and demand economy. This is kind of like the basics of supply and demand.
It will do this by sending a message that will be recorded in a special area of your journal reserved for price alerts, which is basically a precursor to being able to create and post missions.
That's what I love right there.
You can see the message there indicating that the Port Olisar admin office needs food and what they're willing to pay for it. This feature gives designers the ability.
Now, my stance is this. That message not only gets sent to players, that message will also get sent to Quanta, to the Quantum, to the NPC, the VNPC. So you best get on it, because you are merged in with a 9-to-1 ratio, right? So information is key in this game. And the broadcasting of that information is possibly more valuable than the actual trading of the commodity sometimes. So that's something to think about.
Ability to dictate at a systemic level how shops will respond to inventory gluts and shortages, and this functionality will soon be extended to things other than commodities. An area suffering from too much piracy, for example, might offer to pay mercenaries to come to their aid. This is fundamentally different than the brute force tactics we currently rely upon to create missions and dictate when they're available, and it's far more flexible and powerful. What you're really seeing here are the first signs of the dynamic mission system starting to flicker to life, and once it hits full stride, it's going to transform the gameplay experience. Next, let's take a look at how dynamic events allow encounter probabilities and interdiction frequencies to be adjusted. This is the probability volume around Port Olisar. You can see that piracy, the red curve, and security, the blue, are inversely related. All things being equal, if you increase the amount of security, you'll get less piracy, and vice versa. Security tends to congregate closer to the landing facilities and dissipate as you get farther out, and thus piracy tends to gradually increase with distance. The likelihood of an encounter is represented by the height of the curve at that distance. Notice that the chances of running into a freighter, the green curve, is pretty much constant, because once a ship has decided to make the journey to or from Port Olisar, it's committed. They've already decided whether or not the risk is worth the reward of traveling the full route. I'm now going to activate the lockdown phase of this event, which is going to crank up the amount of piracy in the selected area and overwhelm security. The red curve, piracy, now has a much larger average height, equating to an increased encounter probability. And because pirates now greatly outnumber security, the curve pushes in much closer to the landing zone. The criminals are emboldened because there's no longer sufficient security to deter them. The blue curve, security, looks identical, although Quantum will, over time, start adjusting the economic levers to gradually increase the amount of security.
Congratulations, a pirate station is born. Yar, this strictly be for ye pirates here. Yar.
To combat the threat by offering greater rewards. Increased piracy has had an immediate impact, though, on freighter traffic, which has dropped precipitously. This means that the local economy will start to seize up. They won't be able to import food,
everything
medicine,
gets
fuel,
frozen,
or whatever else they need, and they won't be able to.
However, what that also means is the demand for that station and price points should go through the roof, like as far as like needing things. So because there's like this pirate presence around it, like the only way you're getting in and out is if you're a pirate or you have a bad sec rating, and then therefore you can get in and out. But generally speaking, supply is going to plummet, and the actual demand for commodities and goods and the pricing should go through the roof. So there is a huge risk applied here to get to this station, but the reward would be great. The reward would be fantastic if you got anything in there.
Export whatever goods and services they produce. All of these knock-on effects are only possible because designers will now be able to nudge the economic gears in proper systemic fashion. Let's test one of these knock-on.
And notice he said designers will be able to do that. So again, this goes back into that narrative where people will not have, players like us will not have a huge effect on this equation. And again, I don't know necessarily if that is a great thing or a bad thing. I'm not really sold either way on it. Generally, I come from a background that is very like opportunistic, player driven, economy driven kind of dynamics. That's the kind of economies that I normally like, where it's just hardcore trader mode. This is I'm being born into a system that it surrounds me, and that I really have to look for opportunities. I really am going to have to look hard for those opportunities. From what I'm hearing right now, it seems to me like the most profitable kind of ventures in the economy are going to be those that are going to be planet or moon side or out in space in terms of pockets of resources. So really, I think what is going to pay most right now from just watching this presentation is being able to keep a pocket, a resource hidden for as long as you can, and making sure that information and that intel does not leak out into that algorithm. The second a piece or portion of that thing gets leaked out, boom, you're just going to see locusts come in and just take the claim over. So you have to ask yourself a question. Do you want to be the stake finder that takes the time out to mine the area, or do you actually want to just sell the information, which is just very much like in real life, like Sir is saying, so, and also you have to take into account the system that you are in as well. So like everything that I'm seeing right now is great. Like everything that I'm hearing right now, Tony's got a great grasp on economy, on economics. He's got a really good grasp on supply and demand. On supply and demand, period. Like just from listening to him.
Effects. Now that we've adjusted the encounter probabilities, let's see what that does to quantum travel in the area. I'm going to once again bring up a game client, this time so that we can watch an Avenger Titan jumping to Port Olisar.
It is, Ash, and that and generally speaking, that puts a bad taste in my mouth at first. Like, like Ash is saying, I think it's just for minimizing abuse. And, that is the big thing that a lot of normal casual gamers or people that are playing a game get worried about. The exploits. Let's worry about the exploits. Let's worry about the volatility. There's so many people that are worried that players are going to just run with the ball and make this completely over leveraged in terms of their organization or them, period. And they get nervous about that, right? And that was one of the reasons why we have this economy here in Star Citizen. Also, one of the very reasons about 4 years ago that I was talking about how it's important to have a player-driven economy. And I was so very scared about how they were going to implement this 9-to-1 ratio. And I was so very worried. But when Tony Z came out with this 2 years ago at Citizencon and started explaining quantum and saying he wanted to simulate supply and demand and showed me this, I was... There was a couple new tidbits of information in here, which was fantastic about VNPCs as well, which I really like.
This is a short jump, and
still
the chances of interdiction would typically
still
be very
kind of on the
slim.
fence about all this.
Now that we've injected a much larger pirate presence
I like Tony
around that
Z, and he's a
location,
smart
however,
dude.
that's no longer the case. We got ejected from our jump as soon as we got within range of those elevated pirate probabilities, which means that getting to Port Olisar just got a lot more difficult and time-consuming, and will remain that way until the threat is addressed. We're now to the point where we can allow programmatic modification of these data structures, and Quantum will soon start adjusting these automatically so that all sorts of things within the universe start to ebb and flow. What all of this really means is that, even when you know that you can buy medical supplies dirt cheap at one location and sell them for a hefty profit at another, we can finally start to adjust some of the systemic elements to justify the disparity. In short, if you wanted to take advantage of Port Olisar's elevated prices right now, you'd have to fly the last mile at conventional speeds, and we'll probably see quite a bit of combat. That's going to drive up how long it takes you to make the run. You're probably going to burn quite a bit more ammo and require more repairs than would otherwise be the case, and you might want to think about recruiting some armed escorts to help you through the dangerous areas. Once the risk abates, once players in Quanta have dispatched enough of the pirates so that travel within this area returns to normal, you'll be able to much more easily deliver medical supplies to Port Olisar, but of course that increase in supply will quickly shrink the price differential. Now let's take a look at how each server can host part of a larger event, while the things that really matter can remain synchronized. I'm going to enable the war phase by calling the start war function.
Oh.
That's going to create some staged battles involving the ship types we selected earlier around Port Olisar, the area that we previously selected.
That's great. This is what we call creating demand. We like this as traders, as manufacturers. When we see stuff like this, we go, aha, opportunity. We say to ourselves like, oh yeah, you know, they're going to spend all their like sweet creds on ammunitions, different forms of ammunitions and parts and pieces and ships. And this is where we come in as traders and industrialists. And we just are like, hey, want to buy something? Like we know what's happening here. We're creating demand. We're creating the demand.
A couple of different client windows, each of which represents a different server. As each cutlass is destroyed on either server, the shared variable called enemies remaining is decremented. Once that variable reaches 0, the war phase will automatically terminate and the victory phase will be activated.
Woo! Oh man, the explosions are so fucking great in this game. Oh my god. Oh my god. Look at all that. Look at all that. Money, money, money everywhere. Oh, look at that. Everywhere. Oh man, going in salvage at.
That's it.
Get all the
boxes. And you can see the change in the active phases over in Quasar.
Oh, I just need a breath here. I just need a breath to like, that was very exciting for me. Oh man, the industrialist in me just got very excited in the no-no spot right there. I just totally excited.
That last phase, Victory, kicked off some fireworks around Port Olisar, and just like any other phase change, that will automatically be synchronized across all of the servers. Just to make sure that things are back to normal, I'm going to check Port Olisar's admin office and see what's happening with the inventory and prices. They're no longer looking to purchase medical supplies, and with the pirate threat eliminated, players in Quanta can once again quickly and safely reach Port Olisar. As a result, the cost of food has started to fall off a cliff and will soon.
But we should also talk about like the amount of supply that was just spent out there in terms of munitions. You know, like that would be a neat little chart for him to show up there. I'd love to see that chart.
Return to something close to its pre-crisis levels.
So what we saw there was the pirate blockade got busted up, and now that supply was able demand is able to be satiated. So prices of the supplies will then go down because more people are able to go to the station. The pricing goes down, supply then goes back up and stabilizes. Interesting. What's up, Moss?
I've covered a lot of ground today. Quantum has matured considerably since you last saw it. The performance issues have been resolved, it's been made compatible with our backend infrastructure, and it's now communicating with numerous gameplay services. Lots of new analytical tools and functionality have been added, and increased fidelity in areas like Quanta attributes and the spatial positioning of resources have allowed us to improve the accuracy of its output. We're now in early stage testing to allow Quantum to start pushing the first few bits of simulated data out the door and start impacting the game, and we expect to go live with these efforts later this year. The first stones in the Virtual AI Foundation were laid long ago, but it's only been within the past couple of months, as engineering resources rolled off of some other major initiatives, that the implementation effort has really started to take off. This technology will allow VMPCs the freedom to operate and evolve independently of player actions and open up all sorts of new gameplay possibilities.
That sounds to me like the first iteration might not be too embryo baby mode. It might more be toddler mode. like from what he said there, it sounds like it's going to be a little bit more advanced than I was initially thinking there. So that's positive. That makes me feel good that he's saying that.
Bounty Hunter V2 will be the first feature to exploit virtual AI, but it's really just the tip of the iceberg insofar as what we eventually plan to do with it. Some of the virtual AI tech foundation will beget other important features, like the ability to dynamically adjust the size and composition of the populations at landing zones. Dynamic events are the culmination of several major technological components coming together, from the Dynamic Mission Service to Quasar, and are already a reality. We shipped the first one, Xenothreat, in the first quarter and have a number of others at various stages of development for release later this year and next. Many of these initial releases will serve as testing boards for new features, from shop and probability volume modifiers to spawn closets and the dynamic generation of nav meshes. Dynamic events give us the ability to modify the universe in dramatic or subtle fashion whenever we want, and to seamlessly blend those changes into the quantum simulation so that everything looks and feels natural. All of this will ultimately mean a more interesting, realistic, and exciting universe for you to explore and experience. I hope that this presentation has given you a good sense of what we've been doing over the past year and what those efforts will mean for the game in the coming one. Until next time.
Okay, well, we learned that they advanced this the system to C#. We know that there's more quantum being allowed now, which is good. That was a little bit eye-opening. I wasn't too aware of VNPCs, like Soviet said. Was that new information, DG? I'm not quite sure if VNPCs were new information or not. To me, it was. At least maybe I didn't recognize it the first time I saw it at Citizencon. But I always imagined that the algorithm was running and that anytime you would go into an area that the NPC would then exist. So I kind of had that vague notion that that was out there. But as far as like shopkeepers, as far as like the actual NPC standing there next to the shop, or the information that you got from the console, not quite sure that, like, I realize, at least from what I'm getting in this presentation, that like there are going to be some people that actually are there to present you pricing that are actually part of that equation, that come in and that are actively like in that zone, in that algorithm, and then go back into the algorithm, which to me, I didn't know that. Yeah, I'll have to watch it again, Soviet. I'll have to watch it again. But like this isn't like too much new information. But like I did like the fact that it's out there. I'd like to know a little bit more about timelines, how the team is doing. I would like to talk to more, or I'd like to see Tony bring on more of the team. I would definitely like to hear more of the talks. I would like to see I'm sure they won't show the code, but I would like to hear them at least talk about like the issues and the problems that they're having, or the roadblocks they have with quantum. I think that would be a helpful discussion. I really wanted to know like where they're at, or where their mindset is at in terms of like, where they see this going within the next year or two. Like a little bit more on like inserting this into the game. Tony did a pretty good job. He does great at presenting things, and he explained everything fairly well. It was nice to see a little bit more detailed of a presentation. I feel like it was kind of the same presentation. I feel like it was kind of like a little bit more upgraded of the presentation that we saw at Citizencon two or so years ago. Yeah, I did like that too, Fox. I did like that as well. There was a couple tidbits here and there that were a little bit eye openers. But overall, wow. Listen, Tony Z is one of the main dudes at Cloud Imperium. They better never lose Tony Z, ever, man. That guy is the architect for real. All right, everyone, let's get back to the show.